I want to welcome everyone to an amazing event featuring two of the smartest minds in the world of real estate investing, here to share their unique insight and valuable perspectives on building your wealth. Now, our goal today is to help you learn more about real estate investing. And it doesn't matter whether you're just looking to get started or if you've already taken your first step and you're looking to increase your cash flow. This event is going to have something for investors at all experience levels. So first of all, we have Rich Dad co-founder, internationally renowned speaker, and author of Rich Women, Kim Kiyosaki. Kim continues to pursue the Rich Dad mission to elevate the financial well-being of humanity by speaking, teaching, and creating books that empower people to take control of their financial future. And when she isn't helping others, of course, Kim and Robert continue to focus on their own passion for investing, especially in real estate. Now, we're also very excited to have with us today Rich Dad real estate advisor and author of the ABCs of Real Estate Investing, Ken McElroy. For over 2 decades, Ken has experienced massive success in the real estate world, from investment analysis and property management to acquisitions and property development. With over $750 million invested in real estate, Ken offers a unique perspective on how to get the biggest return on investments. So Kim and Ken, first of all, thank you both so much for your efforts to financially educate people around the world. And thanks for being here today. I can tell you, I'm probably as excited as anyone to get started with this discussion. So thank you both for being here.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I'm excited.
And so Kim and Ken, let me ask you, first question out of the box. Each of you, if you would, tell us about your first real estate deal.
Kim, me or you?
You start, Kenny.
All right. So Chris, mine was a $160,000 condo that I bought, and I'll just give you a little backstory. You know, I didn't come from money. I didn't have any money. I actually had about 40 grand in the bank that I had saved because I actually wanted to buy real estate. I was managing property at the time, so I did understand it, which is a huge advantage. And so I did buy that property. It ended up being $160,000, $40,000 down, and it cash flowed about $120 a month, unless there was a vacancy. You know? So that was my very first deal.
And my first deal was back in 1989 in Portland, Oregon. Robert and I had just moved there, and he started to tell me what his rich dad had taught him about investing, and specifically real estate investing. I knew nothing about it. Ken, you had a leg up because you were managing property. I knew nothing. And Robert goes, go see what you can find. And I just stumbled around, and sure enough, like 3 blocks from where we live, there was this really cute little house. It was like a perfect rental. And I really didn't know what I was doing. And maybe that was a blessing in disguise, because sometimes the more you know, the more reasons why not to move forward. So this was $45,000, and I had to put $5,000 down. We did not have $5,000. We were pretty broke at the time. And I'll tell you, doing my very first deal, I was terrified. I was so afraid of making a mistake. I was so afraid of losing money. I was so afraid of if the tenant moves out or the roof leaks, and what if I didn't check this right, and what if, all of a sudden I'm like, here I have to first find $5,000, and then what if I lose it, and then I'm stuck with this house? So all this stuff was going on in my head. And also people around me who were not, this was really important, people around me who were not real estate investors were telling me why I shouldn't do this deal because it's so risky. And I'm like, oh my God, I got enough going on up here. I don't need you telling me. Long story short, found the $5,000, signed the papers, and that property, after I collected the rent and paid the expenses and the mortgage, gave me an overwhelming $25 a month positive cash flow. That was how I started.
I love it.
The same formula today is the same formula I used on that little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house.
Well, that's what I want to ask you, because, of course, we've got viewers from all over the world, different experience levels, but folks just starting out, you hear about Robert and Kim Kiyosaki and Ken, and you're buying resorts. They just don't realize that you all started somewhere. And this is a place, you tell those stories where people can relate to. So I want to know, what do you think since that you got started, both of you, what's this changed in real estate and what is the same?
Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I'll just say one story, because one thing that's changed is look at the interest rates, the lending rates. And everybody, I talk to people all the time, they're like, oh my God, the interest rate, well, the interest rate now has just dropped. But when the rates were going up, oh my God, rates went up 1/4 of a point. Oh my God, they went up 1/2 a point, we're like 4% and 4.5%. And when that very first deal I did, the interest rate was about 12 or 13%, and it still cash flowed. So people sometimes get in their head that, oh my God, the interest rate is so high. Well, relative to what? Relative to when it was 2%. So that's one thing that changed, but I think sometimes people get too caught up in the small details. You got to pay attention, of course, to the numbers and the interest rate, but don't overthink things sometimes.
So for me, Chris, I think, I go back to when I started and I just wish I would have bought everything,
And not sold anything.
Yeah, right. Because obviously, inflation has pushed prices up a lot. And that's just one thing that pushes prices up. But, interest rates, again, like Kim said, are something that fluctuate year to year to year, month to month even. And so that really hasn't changed a lot. Real estate itself hasn't changed a lot. I think what's happened now, if you take a look at some of the, like just in the past, you take a look at like George Bush, he had a big own your own home campaign. I don't know if you remember. And so it was all about owning your own home, which is nothing wrong with that. And so home ownership went up during his presidency. And then after that, it kind of changed, with the next president. And so what happens is as people move into houses or into rentals, a lot of it's based on policy change, interest rates, and demand and supply and stuff like that. So for me, it's fascinating to be able to study that stuff, because at the end of the day, it's literally just math. The demand and supply pretty much command the pricing for rent and for values and for prices and for even interest rates. The reason interest rates are so low today is because there's so much money in the system. That's the only reason. I mean, interest rate is a function of the excess money. So the things haven't changed a lot really since we started. We've just become more experienced and a little wiser and ask better questions, I think.
And Kenny, aren't you seeing a whole lot more competition, like from the industrial institutional buyers and things like that? Because more people seem to be getting into real estate.
Yeah. So that's a really good point. So really, I mean, it's no surprise to see Amazon, what's happened. So Amazon has pretty much killed the normal retailer. So if you look at malls or retail, et cetera, those industries are not doing that great. But what's been replaced, to your point, Kim, is industrial. So industrial, people are, Amazon's buying these big, distribution warehouses, and not just them, others, and they're doing this regional distribution. And so that's what we're seeing on the industrial side. But on the retail and the mall space, boy, that's a bloodbath.
Yeah, that's tough.
So Ken and Kim, first-time investors are often afraid, and you all may remember this, maybe not, of buying a property because they're afraid they won't be able to rent it out. How valid a concern is this, and what can be done to lessen the risk?
Well, this is right in my wheelhouse. I own a management company. We have 300 employees, so we're heavy in the property management business. First of all, it's a legitimate concern. So I think the fact that somebody's concerned about that is a good thing, because they should be. It's managing properties, leasing to people, and renting things should not be taken lightly, and a lot of times they are. And that's actually where most of the mistakes happen. Is they're quick to rent something because they're afraid, and then they put the wrong person in there, and then they can't pay. But if you're buying a piece of property for the purpose of renting it, I would hope that before you bought it, you would take a look at the real estate market, the rental market, the occupancy, the rent growth in that particular market before you buy something. I find a lot of times people do that after. I've even had fairly sophisticated people. I got a ton of stories around this. There were people, they buy in a market. They don't understand that the rental market is not a good rental market. And because those exist, you know, there's streets, even in LA, there are bad side of the street and good side of the street where people will go. And so you have to know it at a granular level, at a sub-market level, before you actually purchase, because you don't want to be caught. That should not be the last decision. It should be one of the first.
And that's a great point, because I travel all over the world, and people say, oh, well, I'm thinking of buying a property in Florida. Well, they live in Tokyo. I'm like, have you gone to Florida? Have you gone to the city? Have you gone to the neighborhood? Have you seen the property? And they buy off the plan, and then they have a disaster. I'll give you one story. I was in Honolulu, and there was a seminar, an evening event, and they were talking about property in Phoenix. And I'm like, hey, let's go see what they're saying. So we go over to listen to this guy talk, and what he's doing is he's getting people to buy into his apartment building in Phoenix. And these people are not going to go to Phoenix. They're going to just buy off of what he says. And what he says is, well, it's in the Biltmore area. Well, I live in the Biltmore area. I know the area pretty well. And I'm looking at this place. I'm like, that is not the Biltmore. That is like 15 miles from where I live. And it's a terrible part of town. And it's on the freeway. And he's just making this all up. So to Ken's point, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is that they don't go and really research the property. I learned from Kenny. I remember one trip we did to Vegas, we were looking at property, and Kenny, you didn't hook us up with brokers until after we met with property managers.
Right.
Because they were the wealth of information. They didn't care, right, which property we bought. They just wanted to manage it. So
well, right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I learned from you.
It's pretty common sense if you really think about it. Buying something is actually quite easy, in my opinion, but actually having it perform is not. And so there's a lot of emphasis on the sales side and the numbers, and that's all important. Don't get me wrong, but it's not a stock. It's not something you can walk away from. This is something that people are in, and there's real expenses in landscaping and, maintenance and management and advertising and stuff. It's a business. And so when we were in Vegas with Robert and Kim, we were touring properties that, I want to know from the property manager's standpoint what the occupancies are, where the trends are, because they know. They're watching it all. They're watching people move around, and they're watching new buildings being built and other ones being renovated and all those kinds of things. And that information is so valuable when you're buying.
Yeah, it is. And I've learned that well from you. Another quick story is I was in Detroit 2 months ago. Well, Detroit, we've heard over the years, has been a disaster. They went bankrupt. The place was a ghost town. But I didn't realize when I went there, and I specifically had a tour of real estate, downtown Detroit is becoming revitalized. And there's a very well-known real estate investor developer who's come in and wants to revitalize Detroit. Now, I didn't know that, and I wouldn't have known that had I not gone there and seen what part of town is good, what part of town is bad. Just to your point, Kenny, one side of the street is better than the other side of the street, but I'm not going to know that unless I go. So yeah. I think that's one of the keys we all agree on is you've got to go spend some time and learn the area, learn the property.
Absolutely. And to hear both of you say that at your level, I think is so important for everybody watching. I was just talking with a real estate agent the other day and recommending Rich Dad Poor Dad, as I do often.
Thank you, Chris.
I assume often that everybody's read it. And I remember, after I talk to people, that not everybody's read it. And people still think in a traditional manner. A lot of people, when they think about retirement, they think about 401k, IRAs, that type of thing. I want to hear from both of you. How can real estate fit into somebody's retirement plan? What benefits does it offer that some of the others don't have?
Well, I think, Chris, one of the great things about traveling around the world with Robert and Kim and the Rich Dad team, has been to be able to look at the other retirement systems in the other countries. And it's been fascinating to me. So it doesn't matter where we are, honestly, in Singapore or in Germany or in the UK or Canada or Australia or New Zealand. We've been to all those places. But, everybody has the same issue, right? What do you do after you retire? Ours is called the 401k. In Canada, it's called the RSP, which is a retirement savings plan, which is basically the same thing. And in Australia, it's called superannuation, which is also like our 401k. They're just branded differently. The big difference is that in the US, the government basically controls who can invest that money. So in other words, in an RSP model, like in Canada or in a superannuation in Australia, you actually have control of your money. You can invest it in real estate. You can invest it in stocks. You can invest in oil and gas. You can do whatever you want. Here, it's super hard. It all goes into this highly regulated, high taxed, if you pull it out, scenario. And so what's happened is in a lot of those other countries, what I've noticed is that people are more educated because it's their money and they have to make decisions and they're not just leaving it up to somebody like they are here largely. And so, what I tell people around the 401k plan is that you should move your money, part of it, to a self-directed plan. So in other words, you can have money in a 401k, then you can move it into what's called a self-directed plan. So it's still your money, but you put it over there. And now you, as it's self-directed, you can invest it how you want. There are restrictions still around that, but you can use that money to invest in real estate. So a lot of people kind of focus on the money, and I understand that. But really, it's really about the education, because you can move it into a self-directed, but then, like back to our first question, what happens if you don't invest it well? It's still going to lose money, right? So, but really, traditionally, I think the main problem and the mission of Rich Dad is financial literacy, as you know. The main problem is that people turn their money over to other people and they don't understand how it's being invested.
And it's all about the education, because if you have no financial education, then maybe you should stick with a 401k or a self-directed. But Kenny, given the choice, would you do a 401k or real estate today?
Yeah, there's no choice. Yeah, I actually have very little in a 401k.
The reason Robert and I, quote, retired, we didn't really retire, but we could retire when I was 37 years old, it was because of our cash flow of our real estate. And I think getting knowledge and getting experience in cash flowing real estate is a much more secure retirement than counting on savings or a 401k. I've talked to many people. I remember this couple that I was talking to in Honolulu, and they just moved to Honolulu. They were moving to Maui. They were so excited, but he says, I just don't know if we have enough money saved up to last us through retirement. And I think a lot of people find themselves in that situation. So I just know for me, and I'll speak for Kenny, that having the cash flow from our real estate allows us to have a retirement where a lot of people are going to find themselves in dire straits in the next few years, betting on 401ks and stock market and all of that. At least with real estate, we have control. We have control over the income, over the expenses, over the debt, and over the cash flow. So I think for me, people think what we do is risky. It's not risky, not if you know what you're doing and you take the time and you do it well.
We actually have more control.
Yes, much more control.
We have more control over our money, where it goes. And if somebody moves out, let's say of one of our rentals, yes, there's anxiety and stress around that, of course, but then you have the ability to re-rent it.
Yes.
Quickly. Yeah. And if they're doing it correctly and they're a good resident, then they're giving you proper notice, and it gives you plenty of time to find somebody new, and you're just talking about a few days. So it does happen, but it's not, in our company, we have 10,000 tenants. We hardly have any delinquents or people skipping out or anything like that. And
that's because you vet them so well coming in. I mean, you do credit checks, you do criminal background checks, you check them out very, very well.
We do. Yep.
Yeah. To your point earlier, when you said, some people are just so eager to get somebody in there that they'll rent to anybody, and that's what causes the problems. So you've really got part of the education has to be your vetting system going into into the property as well.
So I want to shift gears a little bit because, many times people think about real estate investing. They think about, buying a home or having apartments and renting them out. What other real estate investments have you all done and had success in that weren't in the residential home or single family home or apartments?
Well, I'm working on a deal right now as we speak, and it was a large fitness club. It was a big box, and the lease came up, and they decided not to renew. So, of course, the first thing we thought of, well, let's go find another fitness club that wants to buy this. And we went down a lot of paths. We looked at commercial as well, and what we're ending up with right now, and again, we're still in the process, but it looks like it's going to happen. It is a senior housing development, of which is a major trend coming forward because of all of us aging baby boomers are going to need assisted care and things like that. But the beauty of it is we are not actually developing the property. What we're doing is we're supplying the land. Basically, they're renting the land from us, and they are building the building, they are managing it, renting it, all of that. They're doing all the work, all the operations, all the development, and it's called a ground lease. So every month we get a nice check for renting the land to these developers and the senior housing people.
Wow.
So that's kind of like the easiest deal on the planet because there's no management at all. The worst case scenario is if they don't come through, we get the entire property and the entire building. So it's a very sweet deal.
Well, and Kim, real quick before Ken, I want to hear your answer on that. It's a pretty creative deal. And have you found over the years, because you've done this for so long, that maybe you tend to think outside the box even more than when you first got started?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I mean, when I first started, I didn't even know what a rental property looked like or how it operated. I made so many mistakes. And it's from the mistakes where, of course, the great learning happens. We hate making mistakes because oftentimes in real estate, that means you're losing money and that's not fun. But it's the mistakes that are really the knowledge and move us forward down the road. Yeah.
I think that's one of the most exciting things.
Yeah. To that point, Chris, people often say, when I have the money, I'll invest. We didn't have the money on our first property. We actually did not have the down payment for probably the first 10 to 12 properties. But because of that, it forced us to get very, very creative. To your point about thinking outside the box, we had to get very creative on how to find the money. So even today, oftentimes we don't have the money because it's always invested, but we never let that stop us from doing a great deal.
Well, and I think it's so important for those that are watching that maybe are getting ready to do their first deal. When you hear that, it sounds very intimidating. And of course, you all sound like geniuses, which you are. But the reality is you guys have done this for so many years, done so many different types of deals. You get creative. You guys are inventing, new investments. So I think it's just
Penny's always looking for the next thing. Always. I'm always talking to me. I'm like, what are you working on now?
I know. Yeah, I think, Chris, I love this business. I'm known as a multifamily guy, as you know. We had up to 10,000 apartments at one time. Now we're at 7. But in the meantime, I've put together deals for self-storage. So we own self-storage. We're doing ground-up construction for self-storage. We bought a resort in Sedona. Kim and Robert are my partners. That's been didn't cash flow on the first couple of years. And so we knew that going in, but now it does. And we bought it for the water rights and the land value, and now it's cash flowing. I started getting into the billboard business. So this is actually what I wanted to discuss, because I think this, I don't think I've even told Kim this story. So I started buying billboards, and you can buy these things like $250,000 to $500,000, and they generate cash flow of, $440,000 to $70,000 to $100,000 a year. And so these are really good deals. And so I bought in several. And so there was a piece of land for sale in Mesa, Arizona. It was 2 acres, and it had a billboard right in the middle. And so I bought both for $250,000. And then I moved the billboard. I put a new billboard in toward the end. I created my own lease, and then I relisted the land, which actually ironically had gone up, and that's just an added benefit. I was actually okay with it being down to 200, but we ended up selling it for more than we bought it for, and now we have this billboard, free and clear, that produces so far about $40,000 to $50,000 a year, and we have zero investment in it. So to me, that's a real estate deal. That's a lease deal. It's a long-term, makes $3 or $4 grand a month. It's in the middle of Mesa, Arizona, but we are in that deal for zero. And so there's a lot of things you can do around real estate, and there's just so many things to learn, and it's really, really fun.
Okay, so I'm just curious now, because this is new to me. So, who's your customer? Who's your customer for the billboards? So
here's what I learned. Municipalities hate billboards. Like, nobody's allowing new billboards. And so what we actually started doing, now I'm going to unleash the whole thing, Kim. There's what's called a static billboard, which is two sides. And so I'm like, well, why don't we just convert these to digital? And then we have two sides, but 4 ads on each side. So you have 8, you go from 2 ads to 8 ads. So you basically quadruple your revenue, because now an ad's every 15 seconds. So I started doing that. I started buying billboards and then converting them to digital. And now, we're just on a massive hunt to try to find more.
I love it.
It's a perfect example too. I'm sure when you got started, you weren't thinking about billboards when you were thinking about real estate.
Oh, no, not at all. It's just, it's just so funny, because to me, it's just cash flow. Why wouldn't you? These billboards that we're buying, honestly, they're $200,000, $300,000. And I actually looked at a bunch of billboards on the Sunset Strip. They were all for sale like about a year ago in LA. Very expensive, $1 million each. But again, who wants to be on that billboard? To Kim's question, a lot of people are putting ads up all over the place. So it just depends on where. And so for us, Kim, we have one right across from the Arizona Diamondback Stadium. So we have the Diamondbacks on there. We have the car dealerships, and all the people that you would see advertising at these professional baseball games, are on our board. So that kind of stuff. You'd be very surprised that the billboard business is hot.
That's great.
No doubt. Well, and I want to ask both of you too, because obviously you enjoy partnering together on deals, and it sounds like it's been a lot of fun. This is something that Robert talks about and encourages people to surround themselves with the right team, have the right advisors, a mentor. But for both of you, and you can talk about your own experiences together, but how important has it been to have good partners for you personally, but also for your investments? Ken, how about you first?
Well, for us, it's everything. Your entire reputation is based on the relationship with your partners, your investors, and our employees. We place our employees very high, and our investors very high, and our partners very high, all equal. And for us, it's been full transparency, good and bad. Because we don't always make the right decisions. I mean, as Kim knows, like lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of mistakes. But that's how you learn. And so you just try to make sure that you don't do that again. And so for us, it's the math in the books. It's pretty clear, at the end of the day, the financial statement is your report card, period. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. So when the monthly financial comes out, we either hit our numbers or we don't. And then that's where the rubber hits the road.
And Kenny, I remember you telling me, to your point about transparent, I think it goes back to Lehman days, or you were making a pitch for a large property to one of the major banks. And it was the Portland property, and you started with, let me tell you all the problems this property has. And you started with that. And then you went into the good news.
Right. Yeah.
So it is very transparent.
Yeah. The investment bankers, even at that level, everybody's in there trying to sell. And so, having the experience on the property management side and the buying side, we went in there with a whole laundry list of, these are all the issues that we still have, and this is the upside and the potential, which is usually opposite of what most people do.
Ken, what advice would you give and you have to think back now to a time when you used to manage your own properties. but what advice would you give an investor that insists on managing their own properties?
Yeah, actually, I encourage it a lot of times, surprisingly, if they have the time. I think, and I always ask them this question, why? So if it's to save the management fee, then that's the worst decision ever. Because the truth is the management fees are super low, generally, maybe 8, 9, 10% on a single family. And in my world, they're 2.5% of the gross. And so the management companies generally don't make a ton of money, and it's a lot of work. So if they have the time, I actually encourage it because it does help them for buying the next property, being, I call it boots on the ground, understanding things like the, capital items on the roofs or the electrical system or the plumbing or whatever it might be when you're buying something, happens at the property management level. And so if people have the time to do it, and I believe that they should, I think that they should self-manage, because the way I look at it, the reason I have a management company is I'm managing my own money. All my stuff's invested. And of course, Kim and Robert, and we have hundreds of others investors, but they're all managing with us along with my money. And so I get the opportunity to manage it myself.
And I would agree. When I started, I was managing my own properties. And the reason I was managing them is because we inherited property managers with these apartment buildings. Which actually was a great thing. It was a good thing at the time, because in the beginning, when I was buying single family homes, I actually hired a management company in the very, very beginning, in the first few properties, because we were traveling all the time. We were on the road 80% of the time. So I hired a property management company. I had no idea how to manage a property, and I didn't know what questions to ask, and I didn't know what to look for. And it was pretty much a disaster. So then when I got into the apartment buildings, small apartment buildings, I had managers that came with the property, and I could keep them or not, but they were very experienced, and they actually taught me how to manage a property, and it was the best education. So then as I went forward, I got to a point where I couldn't manage all the properties because there were too many and I was running out of time. And that's when I met Kenny, and Ken said, I said, "Oh my God, great, a property manager. Can you manage my properties?" And he says, "No." And I'm like, "Why not?" And he says, "Because we only manage properties of 100 units or more." And so that took us to the next level. So then our next property was the 100-unit property. But had I not learned about property management, it's the key to whether a property is successful or not.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like so much of what both of you are saying is their mistakes are going to be made, but you got to make a decision, and you have to move.
To your point, Chris, is that a lot of people, they read the books and they take seminars, they take classes, but they just don't cross that line.
Yeah. And
it's a key. And that's why we always say, start small, start on a small property with a little bit of money, because you are going to make a lot of mistakes, and it's better to make mistakes with a little bit of money than a lot of money. Had I started with a 100-unit apartment building, I guarantee you I would have lost it. I would have lost my money. I would have lost the property because I had no idea what I was doing. So as with anything, we always say, just start small, put a little money down, and then start gaining experience.
Well, and I say that jokingly, but the point is you've both survived. You're both still alive. You're both a whole lot better off than when you got started. But the reality is there are some that are watching that maybe have a lot of the education. And we all know the best education starts when you start investing.
Right.
But what would you say to those that maybe they've just started getting into it? Maybe they've been gathering information for a while, but they just can't bring themselves to make that first step. What would you say to them?
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, I think what happens a lot of times, Chris, this is probably the question, my experience has been, when I was growing up, I distinctly remember my parents had gone through the Depression. I distinctly remember, secondhand clothes, we can't afford that, blah, 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 blah. So my mindset as a kid was there. I was there. I had no idea in my entire life that I would ever be able to, own $1 billion worth of real estate. because of the mindset that I was in my environment. And so what happened for me is once I changed my environment, once I graduated from college and I started working for this company that was in the property management and investment, real estate investment world, which is what I did, then I started to be around people that had different mindsets and were doing things. And I started to see the possibilities, and, you know, my mind started to open before it was closed, and I didn't even know it was closed. And so I think a lot of times people, you know, as Jim Rohn would say, you are the 5 people you hang around with, you know. I think that's largely true. And so for me, and at Rich Dad, we say environment is stronger than will. I believe that. I really believe that. I focus that on my 2 kids. I make sure I always want to know who they're hanging out with. I believe that's a big, big, big deal. The external influences that come with your environment. So once I changed that, once I got mentors and coaches and started getting to meetup groups and people that were doing this kinds of things, then I started to educate myself, and that's when I started to do more.
And that makes so much sense, because even when I was doing my first property, I still had people telling me, oh, it's risky, you're going to lose money, because they didn't know anything about real estate investing. So I think that's a key point, is who you're hanging around with and what your own thoughts are. And I would also go back to, if you're looking at a certain area and you're looking at, like, you're close to home is ideal from where you live, if that's possible, is to go start talking to a property manager and have the property manager start teaching you about what's happening in your market. They, as Kenny said, they know most of the properties, and they know how they operate, and they know who owns what and what's for sale and all of that. But yeah, you've got to get around people that are of that mindset, who are real estate investors, like-minded, similar goals. I think that's a crucial point.
Well, great information. Before we wrap up, I just want to ask both of you real quick, for those that are watching from all over the world, what parting words of advice would you have for them?
Go ahead, Kim.
I would say, no matter where you are, number one, the key is to get a little financial education. Don't paralyze yourself with analysis paralysis. Get some education, and then just get into the game and put a little money down, get started. And it's not rocket science. If you have already been investing, ask yourself, you know, it's out of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. How can I afford it? I can't afford it. A lot of people say, I can't afford it. How can I afford it? So you've got property now. How do you get more property? How do you grow it? Keep challenging yourself and keep getting creative. There's so many ways to do real estate. There's so many ways to create the money for real estate. It really is, to me, it's a very creative process. Even the numbers all tell a story. It's a fun game, and it will, if you do it well and keep doing it and getting that cash flow, it will lead to financial freedom.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. So, Chris, what I would say is that people should realize that the system, the way it's set up today, is to manage your money, period. And if you look, just Google, you know, what's the average savings? You know, it doesn't really matter where you are in the world. It's low. You know, most people consume and they don't invest. And so I think that you just look at history, just look at and see that the system isn't working. And if you're going to get ahead, you have to take control of your investments. If you're putting money away through your employer, for example, or you have money sitting somewhere with somebody, you really need to be active and really dig in and ask a lot of why questions. Well, why is it here? How much are your commissions? You know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because I don't know about you, Chris, but I got a lot of friends that haven't, you know, a lot of money invested in these different brokerage accounts, and those balances really haven't changed year over year over year very much. And so they're very concerned that, you know, they're going to run out of money in, 3, 4, 5 years, some of them, and some people are going to run out of money in less than a year. So the math is there. It's clear that people don't do a good job of investing their own money and becoming educated. So I think people should read anything they can. They should watch everything they can. and they should take an active step in their own personal development around financial literacy.
And to that point, Ken, we're looking at, record highs right now with a lot of real estate prices all over the world. And there looks like there is definitely going to be a huge change. And I think in the future, there's going to be a lot of properties for sale. And there could be a lot of opportunity out there with properties for sale. And if you know what you're doing and know how to see a good opportunity and know how to spot a good deal from a bad deal, this could be one of the best times where a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money. This could be an opportunity, if you know what you're doing with real estate, to really make a huge advance in your real estate investing. And it's why Robert and I created the cash flow board game, was because we were financially free and everybody kept asking us how we did it. And if you look at the cash flow board game, a lot of the ROI, return on investment, a lot of the cash flow comes from real estate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, listen, our boys were homeschooled. We played plenty of cash flow.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that.
Well, Kim and Ken, thank you so much. I know you guys are very busy, but the information that you imparted today is so huge. And I just hope everybody was taking notes. And I hope we get to do this again soon. But thank you guys both for being with us today.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. It was fun. Thanks, Kenny.
See you, Kim.
Well, we definitely covered a lot of great information and on investing in real estate. And we wish everyone watching all of the success in the world. Stay tuned. You're in the right place to move forward. So we want to see you be financially free.
Mùa lụt nước lũ bắt cá giữ